I'm not used to it yet. Like, depends on how I feel, you know?
Okay, so we have 20 minutes.
Okay.
And we will have 3 minutes to open and 2 minutes to close, so
Okay.
whenever you're ready.
Good morning, I'm Jeffrey Deen. I am currently the Regional Counsel for the Criminal Conflict and Civil Regional Counsel Office of the 5th District Court of Appeals. I've been a lawyer for 30 years. This is my 30th year. I started out in Sanford as an assistant state attorney, as an intern. I had my clinical hours in, so I came in and started right away. And I worked for Mr. Norman Wolfinger for that period of time. I was an assistant for 5.5 years. I worked primarily in misdemeanors. I started in the misdemeanor division, tried cases before I left there, and before I was even in the felony division, I got to be the head of the misdemeanor division for a short period of time. After that, I tried felonies, and then midway through that period of time, Mr. Wolfinger asked me to start the sex crimes and child abuse division of the state attorney's office back in the 80s when they didn't have that, so we were kind of winging it. We started that division there. I worked there, tried those kinds of cases for a while. In 1990, after I'm going to say stupidly ran for judge way too soon, I went to work in a private firm for a very short period of time. I came back to the state attorney's office. That's when I ran for judge, and then after that, me and 2 of my buddies started a law firm. We added one of our other buddies in the early 90s, and that, in some version, is where I was for the next 17 years. In 2007, with the change in funding for court-appointed lawyers that came through the legislature, it had been changing all the way through the early 2000s, but finally the legislature created this agency that I run. It had never been created here before. It was a cost-cutting measure at the time. It was created by the legislature in 2007. In the summer of 2007, I was appointed by then Governor Chris to this job for the first time, and it didn't exist. So we literally started out of the air. It has now grown to 8 offices in 13 counties. Our jurisdiction is the counties of the 5th District Court of Appeals, so wherever this court has jurisdiction, that's where we are. We are a backup public defender for the public defender in criminal cases when they can't do criminal cases, and then we do a number of other things, but the main thing that this has become is we've become the first in-court public defender for parents in dependency cases when they've been accused of abuse, abandonment, or neglect. That's what I do now. Thank you.
Carrie-Ann?
Good morning, Mr. Dean.
Good morning.
When I was reading your application, I noticed that you've had many different positions over your career, various levels of positions as well, from starting out to becoming a leader, supervisor, things like that, and probably a lot of administrative roles in your current job. What would the people that work for you and under you say about you as your leadership style and your personality?
I hope they would say how much they love me, and I say to my people, I have about 100 people that work for me now, work with me now. I think that my lawyers would say I give them enough room to be lawyers. I don't micromanage lawyers. I don't think that's going to work. I try to let lawyers be lawyers, so I try to really interview in a way that makes it so they can do their jobs. Of course, if they fall into trouble, I tell them when I interview them that it could go 2 ways. One way is that you have lots of room to be creative, or maybe I'm just giving you rope. And so we haven't given out much rope. We have very little turnover, so I'll use that as an indicator that I believe our lawyers are happy. I tell everybody that works with me that I like my lawyers, but I love my staff. This would not function without a competent staff. I have 8 offices. We're spread out from St. Augustine to Brooksville to Melbourne and everything in the middle. So I ask people to drink the Kool-Aid for me, and they laugh about it, and then they hopefully drink the Kool-Aid. As I say, if I'm sitting here today, that means there's 7 other places I'm not, so I really have to have people that can do it. So I really empower my staff. I give my staff a lot of responsibility because they make the nuts and bolts of this work. In fact, my office here is literally right around the corner. So I hope that they would like their job. I think that they're comfortable. I do believe that our morale is really high. I think that we have a place where people want to come to work and want to stay, and I'm really proud of it.
And one other question I have. So when I was researching you and vetting you, I came across an Orlando Sentinel article from 1989, going way back, and I think it was when you had left the state attorney's office and gone, I think either into private practice or defense. You had said that you would never represent child abusers or rapists. Have you stuck true to that, or if not, why? And are you kind of a bright line type person where you like to rely on those bright lines, black and white, or do you venture into gray area?
That was made by a very young man who didn't really have any experience at all. But let me say this about that. I had just left, literally, when that article was written, I literally just left from doing that. And so I wasn't comfortable then saying I'm just going to jump right into representing sex offenders or sex cases. Over the years, I've done it many times. I believe that when we mature, we have more depth of knowledge, we understand really what the system is about and how it's being done, that we provide a very important function. And in fact, my last jury trial was a capital sexual battery in which I took it off our docket because it was going to be a big space eater. My frontline docket lawyers have a lot of work, so I try to take some difficult cases off their plate. The defendant was Vietnamese. It was going to require a lot of translating and things like that, so I took that off the docket. I actually represented him. That was actually my last jury trial. That was a really naive statement by a very young man who wishes he hadn't given a newspaper interview at the time, but no, I don't think that.
I have one kind of personal question and then
Okay.
actually about your background. The personal one is I heard as I was kind of looking into your background, I heard that you were in the wrestling business. And
Very funny.
I'm
Yes,
just
I
curious
was.
to know what your experience was. Were you actually like a wrestling manager?
I was
one of these
actually-
guys that creates the havoc? Tell us about that. if you
First, I
will.
need to make sure that you understand that anything you see on TV is nothing like I looked. I've always been fascinated with it. When I was much younger, I really wanted to try it. Never did. A buddy of mine who works for the Sanford Police Department got involved in it very locally in Sanford. He was doing it for a charity, and I said, well, if you're doing it, let me do it. And then I got into it, and so for about a year, I was Mr. Money, professional wrestler. I started out as a manager, but over the time became more in wrestling. I will say this about that. Judges and policemen and lawyers used to come and watch me. What you need to know about the professional wrestling is they want people in the seats, so I brought people. So I moved up the main event ladder, not from ability, but from my ability
Were
to
you
get people.
good or the good guy or the bad?
I was the bad guy.
Okay.
My son used to sit in the audience and go, Dad, they hate you. And I said, well, that's a good thing, because in wrestling you want to be the most popular or the most hated. And so I was one of the most hated. And for years after that, I would be in the mall or something, and somebody would be staring at me, and I would go, did I used to represent that? And they would walk up to me and go, are you still wrestling in Sanford? So that's what I became known for. No, I did it for a while. Being scripted and being fake are totally different. I had broken rib, I had all kinds of issues, but it was a lot of fun, and now I'm just too old to do it.
So, thank you, but here's a more serious question. You are in a unique position. You have a kind of an administrative role, supervising attorneys and having a large staff, I'm sure, is a daunting experience because you can't do everything yourself. You have to rely on your lawyers and your staff. So my question to you is, how do you think your experience, when you're an appellate judge, you have to read briefs, you have to read cases, you have to write opinions. how do you think your experience, or actually I should ask, it's two parts. One, how hands-on have you been in actually writing briefs, reading briefs, and arguing cases as opposed to staff attorneys? And how do you think that your experience in the administrative kind of supervisory leadership role you have will translate into being an appellate judge, where you have to be in the
Yes, sir.
in the foxhole, so to speak?
Yes, sir. I have kept cases all the way through. I've kept a small caseload, usually more difficult cases so that my lawyers don't have to address those. I have currently a case now that I'm working on. I have written more than, I would say, at least a half a dozen briefs since I've been the regional counsel.
How long has that been?
It's been 7 years. This is the 7th year. We have an appellate division, so we have, so I've dealt with the mechanics of retrieving transcripts and things like that. I know that that may not be a big thing here, but I've dealt with this court quite a bit, or at least our office has. We've dealt with the costs and things. I've written briefs. The most recent brief I've written, I believe I've included in there. I've also taken some, I included another brief in there that I took from one of my lawyers on a sentencing matter to address a proportionality issue that I thought was important to bring before the court. I take, we have some experienced appellate lawyers that I try to rely on, but I take them pretty regularly as my time permits. I also try to keep on trial dockets, and not locally. The case I have now is a first-degree murder, and it's in Daytona, actually in DeLand. I just finished one with one of our trial partners that was over here. So I try to keep my hand in it a lot. I probably have had, I've taken, during periods of time, I've gone to particular locations and taken dockets for a while. Last year and a half ago, we got a new county judge in Seminole County. I wasn't sure what the procedures were going to be because that judge was new, so I just took that docket for a few months. I just took the cases myself.
How many cases in the last 7 years have you actually argued at an appellate level?
Here,
Yeah, or anywhere, whether here or
on an
in
appellate
any
level,
other
I've
jurisdiction?
actually argued.
Actually argued.
One.
And how did that turn out?
It was that case about the sentencing. It was doomed from the beginning. I had made an it was about prison releasee reoffenders. The law was really well settled. I won't go into the facts in the limited time. It was a case in which I thought the punishment didn't fit the crime, although it was a perfectly legal sentence. I brought it up anyway and argued a proportionality argument that basically said the punishment doesn't fit the crime, and here's how we know. And of course, I came here and lost. I also had made an argument in that brief and made the argument here that it violated separation of powers, but that had already been settled. I was just bringing it
So
up.
here's my question.
Okay.
I don't want to take up all the time, but if you have an area of settled law,
Yes, sir.
wouldn't it be better to walk away from a case or concede that the decision was appropriate as opposed to coming to the appellate court with, based upon facts and law that are settled? How do you kind of get your hands around making arguments to a court involving areas of law that are settled and maybe not taking those cases as opposed to just arguing for a position that is, you know,
So,
not heavily, doesn't have merit, I should say that.
I'm going to distinguish what you asked me this way. Sometimes points of law that are settled still have merit. I would distinguish what you said in this way. If it doesn't have merit, I wouldn't take it. There are points of law that are settled that often have merit and need to be brought again. I'd actually spent quite a bit of time speaking with some people that mentor me about that case because I wanted to know if I didn't address it exactly the way you did, sir, but I did address it. In my opinion, many things that are settled would never change if someone wasn't bringing the point back to the court to challenge it again. That is not the same as a case that doesn't have merit. And so, in my view, the points of law had merit, even though some of them appear to be settled.
Good answer. Thank you.
I have a couple
Yes, sir.
questions for you about your application here.
Okay.
Just, you know, we look at the applications, the governor's office looks at the applications.
Yes,
I'd
sir.
like them to be complete.
Yes, sir.
There's a couple areas
Okay.
I'm not sure are complete. 18A talks about secondary schools, colleges, and law schools attended. It asks for schools, class standing, dates of attendance, and degree. Under class standing, you've got unknown next to University of Florida and the law school at Stanford University in Cumberland. Can you help fill us in what those answers are?
I have no idea what my class standing was at the University of Florida. I believe I was in the, I didn't want to put an answer that was any kind of, just for me to be safe about it, I was probably in the top 40%.
In law school?
Yes, sir. Maybe. I wasn't comfortable giving an answer like that, so I just didn't.
Okay, related to question 43B, have you ever paid a tax penalty? You answered yes, then you said see below.
I did.
It says if yes, please explain what was the penalty. As I read below, it doesn't tell me what the penalty
I
actually was.
attached the lien. It's one of the attachments.
A lien's different than a penalty, though.
I assume that was a penalty. I've answered that question on those applications that way
Okay.
throughout the time, so I just
This is
thought,
all types of penalties.
seemed to me to be a penalty at the time, so I put it.
Some are much worse than others. That's the
Yes,
reason I'm
sir.
asking the question.
That's what it was. That's what I was trying to address, and so I actually attached the document so that you can see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to speak a little bit about your civil experience?
Sure. For 17 years, I was in private practice. Over the course of that time, I developed a very extensive family law practice. So I did a lot of divorce cases, a lot of child custody, a lot of issues that revolved around the family court. I, at one point during that time, represented a towing company in issues that dealt with illegal towing and matters like that. I have done some contract work. Most of my civil experience would have been in family law, and now in the agency that I'm in, dependencies and a whole list of statutes that cover civil commitment, from adult protective services to tuberculosis cases, are all civil matters that I oversee. So dependency cases are also civil cases, but I've done, my background mostly is in family law, and then in this agency, the civil matters that we do every day. We're restricted a lot by statute in some of the civil responses we're allowed to give. We're not allowed to sue people or anything like that. So some of the things we're restricted from doing don't allow us to be parties to lawsuits or anything like that. So we're restricted that way. But our dependency caseload is literally half of what we do, and I'm quite active in supervising the lawyers that do that. It's a really important place. Our agency has become the first line public defenders that have never been in there before for representing parents. So we take that obligation very seriously. But I've done very complicated divorces. By the last 4 or 5 years of my private practice was mostly doing divorces. I kept a criminal docket, but it was under court-appointed rules, and I took private cases if I got them, but I didn't solicit them, and so I kept those kinds of cases, but did quite a bit of divorce work before I got this.
Thank you. You have about a minute to close.
Okay. Well, I hope that, I realize that I'm not a judge, but I do believe that I'm going to say judge ready and not do air quotes, but I think that my experience is extensive, it's varied. I think that I have a depth of knowledge that would aid me in being a judge on this court. I think that it's our job on this court to explain and to enlighten and to help lawyers understand what the law is. This is a lawyer's court. It's not a trial court. And so I believe that it's important for judges to understand what they're doing here matters to the people that have to read and understand where they're supposed to go from here. I hope that my experience would speak to you about that, and I really thank you for giving me the chance to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff.
What'd your costume look like?
When I was in college, my girlfriend at the time gave me this robe that looked like it had all these colors on it. So I still had it, and so I would wear that and regular kind of shorts, so it wasn't like,
That'd be great.
it was multicolored. Yes. You'd have to have seen my